I never thought I'd see the day when my own son would look me in the eye and tell me to get out of the house I'd lived in for 40 years. The house where I'd raised him. The house his father and I bought with our own sweat and sacrifice. But there he stood, his wife's hand on his shoulder like a puppeteer pulling strings, telling me I had 30 days to pack my things and move into a care facility. I'm 68 years old, not dead. And I'm certainly not stupid. So when he screamed those words at me, "My wife calls the shots here. You're leaving," I did something that surprised us both. I laughed, and then I made a phone call that changed everything. Before I begin my story, let me know in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is. I just want to know I'm not alone in this. And if you feel moved by what you hear, consider subscribing. It helps more people become aware of the reality of elder abuse. Now let me tell you what really happened. My name is Margaret Thompson, but everyone who loves me calls me Maggie. I'm a retired elementary school teacher, and for 35 years I shaped young minds and wiped young tears. I taught second grade, that magical age when children still believe in the goodness of people and the fairness of the world. I wish I could have held on to that belief myself. 3 years ago, my husband Richard passed away from a sudden heart attack. He was 67, still vital and full of plans for our retirement. We were going to travel. We were going to visit our grandchildren more often. We were going to finally take that Alaskan cruise we'd been talking about for years. Instead, I found myself planning a funeral and learning how to be alone in a house that suddenly felt too big and too quiet. Richard had been careful with money his whole life. He left me comfortable, not wealthy but comfortable. The house was paid off. There was life insurance. There were savings and a modest pension along with my own teacher's retirement. I could live with dignity, maybe even help my boys when they needed it, and that's exactly what I tried to do. I have 2 sons. Robert, we call him Bobby, is my eldest at 42. He's a mechanic living in Tennessee with his wife Linda and their 2 teenage daughters. Bobby's always been steady, reliable, the kind of man who calls his mother every Sunday without fail and means it when he asks how I'm doing. He inherited his father's work ethic and his gentle heart. Then there's Daniel, my baby, 38 years old and still trying to find his way, or so I told myself. Daniel's always been the charmer, the one with big dreams and bigger promises. He married Jessica 5 years ago, a woman with champagne tastes and a beer budget, as my mother would have said. They'd been through 3 apartments in 4 years, always one missed payment away from eviction, always one emergency away from disaster. When Richard died, Daniel was there at the funeral with tears in his eyes, holding my hand and promising he'd take care of me. "Dad would want me to look after you, Mom," he said, and I believed him. God help me, I believed him. 6 months after the funeral, Daniel called me late one night. Jessica was crying in the background, and his voice was tight with stress. They'd been evicted again. The landlord had sold the building, and they hadn't saved enough for a new deposit. They had nowhere to go. Their belongings were in a storage unit, and they were staying on a friend's couch. What was I supposed to do? He's my son. So I told them they could stay with me, just temporarily, just until they got back on their feet. I had 3 bedrooms sitting empty. I had space. I had resources. And I was so lonely in that big house that the idea of having family around again felt like a blessing. They moved in on a Saturday in October, 2 years and 4 months ago. I remember because the leaves were just starting to turn, and I thought how nice it would be to have someone to share the autumn colors with. Daniel and Jessica arrived with more boxes than I expected and smiles that seemed just a little too bright. "We'll only be here for a couple of months, Mom," Daniel promised, hugging me tight. "Just until we save up enough for our own place. We really appreciate this." Jessica kissed my cheek, her perfume so strong it made my eyes water. "You're a lifesaver, Maggie, a real lifesaver." That first week was pleasant enough. Jessica made dinner twice, ordered takeout really, but she plated it nicely. Daniel helped me change some light bulbs I'd been putting off. We watched television together in the evenings, and I thought maybe this would be good for all of us. Maybe we'd become closer. Maybe I wouldn't feel so alone anymore. But by the second week, things began to shift in ways so subtle I almost didn't notice. Little things at first. Jessica rearranging my kitchen cabinets to make more sense. Daniel suggesting I didn't need to keep the thermostat so high because it was wasteful. The 2 of them having whispered conversations that stopped when I entered a room. The real problem started about a month after they moved in. Daniel came to me with that same tight expression he'd had the night he called about the eviction. He sat down at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped him with his homework, where we'd celebrated birthdays and holidays, and he asked if he could borrow my credit card. "Just for emergencies, Mom," he said, reaching across to hold my hand. "Jessica's car needs new tires, and we haven't built up our savings yet. We'll pay you back as soon as we get ahead. I promise." I should have said no. I should have offered to loan them a specific amount instead. But when you're a mother, you want to believe in your children. You want to trust them. So I gave him one of my credit cards, the one with a $5,000 limit, and made him promise it was only for genuine emergencies. Of course, Mom, he said, squeezing my hand. Only emergencies. You're the best. That was the beginning of the end, though I didn't know it yet. The credit card charges started small. A grocery bill here, gas there, a doctor's copay. Things that seemed reasonable, things that could genuinely be considered emergencies or necessities. I'd check my statement online each month and see $200, maybe $300. I never said anything because I told myself they were struggling, and what's a few $100s to help your son get back on his feet? But months passed, and Daniel and Jessica showed no signs of leaving. Every time I gently brought up their plans for moving out, there was always a reason why it wasn't the right time. Jessica's hours had been cut at the salon where she worked. Daniel's job at the warehouse was seasonal, and he'd been laid off for the winter. The car needed repairs again. Jessica's mother was sick, and they needed to save money in case they had to travel. Always something, always a reason to stay just a little longer, and the credit card charges grew. $400, $600. By the end of the first year, some months hit $1,000. I'd ask Daniel about it, and he'd look embarrassed and promise to do better. Things just keep coming up, Mom, he'd say. But we're making a payment plan. We'll get it all paid back to you, I swear. I wanted to believe him. So I did what I'd always done as a mother. I made excuses for him. I told myself he was trying his best. I told myself that family helps family, and that's what Richard would have wanted. Meanwhile, my house stopped feeling like my own. Jessica had taken over the living room with her decorating ideas, replacing my family photos with abstract art she'd bought at a discount store. She commandeered the kitchen, making it clear through heavy sighs and pointed comments that she didn't appreciate me getting in the way when she was cooking. My own kitchen, where I'd made thousands of meals over 40 years, suddenly felt like foreign territory. Daniel stopped doing the little helpful things he'd done in the beginning. He slept until noon most days, spent his afternoons playing video games in what used to be Richard's study, and went out with friends in the evenings. When I'd ask about his job search, he'd get defensive. "I'm networking, Mom," he'd snap. "That's how you find good jobs these days. You wouldn't understand. And maybe I wouldn't. I'm from a generation where you showed up, filled out an application, and worked hard." But I kept my mouth shut because I didn't want to be the nagging mother, the burden nobody wants around. Bobby called me every Sunday like clockwork, and I kept my voice bright and my problems hidden. "Everything's fine, honey," I'd tell him. "Daniel and Jessica are doing well. They're looking for a place." I don't know why I lied to him. Pride, maybe. Or shame that I'd let things get this far out of hand. But Bobby knew me too well. "Mom, are you sure everything's okay?" he'd ask, concern threading through his voice. "You sound tired. Are they pulling their weight there? Are they taking advantage?" "Of course not," I'd insist, even as Jessica walked past me without a word and Daniel shouted at his video game in the background. "Their family. We're all just adjusting." The second year was worse. Daniel and Jessica had settled into my home like permanent residents, except they acted more like landlords than guests. They'd complain if I watched my television shows during their time in the evening. They'd order takeout on my credit card 3 or 4 times a week, expensive meals from restaurants I'd never dream of affording for myself. I started eating my dinners earlier and earlier, just to avoid the tension. I'd retreat to my bedroom by 7 o'clock most nights, reading or watching shows on the small TV Richard had bought for our room years ago. In my own house I was hiding. The credit card bills had become frightening. $1,500 some months, $2,000. When I'd check the charges online, I'd see things that definitely weren't emergencies. Clothing purchases, electronics, subscription services I'd never heard of, a charge for $500 at a furniture store, another for $300 at a jewelry store. I finally confronted Daniel about it on a Saturday morning. He was eating cereal at my kitchen table at noon, still in his pajamas, scrolling through his phone. Jessica had gone out shopping, probably, though she never seemed to come home with bags anymore. I wondered if she was returning things for cash. "Daniel, we need to talk about the credit card," I said, keeping my voice calm and reasonable. I'd rehearsed this conversation in my head a dozen times. He didn't even look up from his phone. "What about it?" "The charges are getting out of hand. Last month alone it was over $2,000. And I'm seeing charges that aren't emergencies. Clothing, jewelry, entertainment subscriptions." "So what?" He finally looked at me, and there was something hard in his eyes I'd never seen before. "You said we could use it for what we needed. We need clothes for job interviews. We need to stay entertained so we don't go crazy. You have no idea how stressful it is being unemployed." "I understand stress, honey, but do you?" He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. You're sitting on Dad's life insurance and your pension while we're trying to survive. We're family. Isn't that what you always taught us? Family takes care of each other. The accusation stung. He was turning my own values against me, making me feel guilty for having what Richard and I had worked our whole lives to build. Of course family takes care of each other, I said quietly. But it's been almost 2 years, Daniel. I think we need to set some boundaries. Maybe put a limit on the card, and you two could start contributing to groceries and utilities. Boundaries. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's rich, Mom. Real rich. After everything Dad would have wanted you to do for us, you're gonna nickel and dime your own son. He stormed out before I could respond, leaving his cereal bowl on the table for me to clean up. I sat down in his empty chair and cried for the first time since Richard's funeral. Not just because of the money, though that hurt, but because I was losing my son, and I didn't know how to get him back. That night, Jessica came home with Daniel, and I could hear them talking in their room. Their voices carried through the walls, my walls, and though I couldn't make out every word, I caught enough. Ungrateful. Her own son. We should just leave and let her rot in this house alone. I pulled my pillow over my head and tried not to hear, tried not to feel the way my heart was breaking piece by piece. Bobby called that Sunday, and for the first time, I broke down. Bobby, I don't know what to do, I sobbed into the phone. It's gotten so bad. Mom, what's happening? Talk to me. So I told him everything. The credit card charges, the way they'd taken over my house, the way Daniel spoke to me now, like I was an obstacle instead of his mother. Bobby listened in silence, and when I finished, he let out a long, heavy breath. Mom, you need to kick them out. Today. Right now. I can't do that. Bobby, he's my son. Is a grown man taking advantage of his widowed mother, Bobby said, his voice harder than I'd ever heard it. That's not a son. That's a leech. I'm coming out there next weekend, and we're gonna fix this. No, honey, please. Don't make a special trip. I can handle it. Mom, his voice softened. You can't handle it, or you wouldn't be crying on the phone with me. I'm coming. Linda agrees. We'll figure this out together. After we hung up, I felt a small flutter of hope. Maybe Bobby was right. Maybe it was time to take my house back. But I also felt terrified. What if Daniel never forgave me? What if I lost him forever? I didn't know then that the worst was still to come, and that by the time Bobby arrived, the decision would already be made for me. The following Sunday changed everything. It was the day I stopped being a victim and started being a survivor, though I didn't know it at the time. I'd made a pot roast for dinner, Daniel's favorite. I still did things like that, trying to bridge the gap between us with food and small kindnesses. It was foolish maybe, but old habits die hard. Jessica had been on her phone all afternoon, barely acknowledging my presence as I moved around the kitchen. Daniel was in the living room watching football, his feet up on my coffee table despite the fact that I'd asked him dozens of times not to do that. The pot roast was nearly done when Jessica got up from the kitchen table and stepped out onto the back porch, her phone pressed to her ear. She didn't close the door all the way, and the kitchen window was open to let out the cooking heat. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, I want to be clear about that. But her voice carried and I heard every word. No, Mom, I'm serious. Jessica was saying, her voice thick with laughter. We've got it made here. She pays for everything. We haven't paid rent in almost 2 years. The credit card, we're up to like $23,000 now and she just keeps letting us charge. My hand stopped moving. I was holding a pot holder, frozen in place by the kitchen sink. $23,000. That couldn't be right. The limit on that card was only $5,000. She's a total pushover, Jessica continued. Daniel handles her perfectly. He just acts all sad and stressed and she melts. It's actually kind of pathetic. But here's the best part. We've been talking to a lawyer, and Daniel thinks we can convince her to sign the house over to us. You know, for financial planning purposes or whatever. Then we can move her into one of those assisted living places. She doesn't need a whole house anymore. The pot holder slipped from my hand and fell to the floor. I couldn't breathe. I literally could not draw air into my lungs. I know, right? Jessica laughed again, that bright, careless sound that had once seemed charming. She's 68 and barely needs a cane. She's not even that old. But we'll make it sound like it's for her own good. Safety concerns, you know. And once the house is in our name, we can either live here or sell it. This place has got to be worth $300,000 at least, even in this neighborhood. I grabbed the edge of the counter to steady myself. My vision had gone blurry around the edges, and I could feel my heartbeat pounding in my ears. This couldn't be happening. My son wouldn't do this to me. He couldn't. But Jessica wasn't done. Daniel's going to talk to her this week. We've already looked at a couple of facilities. There's one about 20 minutes from here that's not too expensive. Medicaid should cover most of it once we get her assets transferred. The lawyer said we need to do it soon though, before that older son of hers catches on. Bobby's always been the problem. She laughed again, and the sound of it made my stomach turn. Yeah, we'll probably have her out of here by Christmas. Think of it as an early present to ourselves. Anyway, I've gotta go. The old woman's making pot roast, and I should probably pretend to be grateful. Love you, Mom. Talk soon. The back door opened, and Jessica walked in, still smiling at whatever her mother had said in response. She stopped when she saw me standing there, and something flickered across her face. Calculation. She was trying to figure out if I'd heard. I didn't give her the satisfaction of showing my hand. I turned back to the stove and pulled the pot roast out of the oven with shaking hands. Dinner's ready, I said, and my voice sounded almost normal. Almost. Great, Jessica said slowly. Smells good, Maggie. She never called me Mom, not once in 5 years. I'd noticed that before, but it had never bothered me until that moment. Now it felt like proof that I'd never been family to her. Just a mark. A target. Daniel came into the kitchen, and we sat down to eat. I moved food around my plate, unable to swallow past the lump in my throat. I watched my son eat the pot roast I'd made for him, watched him laugh at something Jessica said, watched him completely ignore the woman who'd given him life and raised him with every ounce of love she possessed. $23,000. A plot to steal my house. Plans to warehouse me in some facility while they sold off everything Richard and I had built. After dinner, I excused myself and went to my bedroom. I waited until I heard their door close, and then I did what I should have done months ago. I got online and checked that credit card account. Jessica hadn't been exaggerating. The current balance was $23,847.52. I scrolled through the charges with trembling hands. Restaurants, bars, clothing stores, electronics, a weekend trip to a casino 3 hours away. Charges at stores I'd never been to for things I'd never approved. There were cash advances. I hadn't even known you could do cash advances on this card. The interest alone was over $400 a month. But here's what really made my blood run cold: they'd requested a credit limit increase. Twice. And because I was the primary card holder and they had the card in their possession, they'd been able to approve it themselves using the automated system. The limit was now $25,000. I sat on my bed, the bed I'd shared with Richard for 38 years. And I felt something crack open inside me, not might already broken. No, this was something else. This was anger. Pure, clean, righteous anger. They thought I was a pushover. They thought I was pathetic. They thought I was a weak old woman they could manipulate and discard. I picked up my phone and called Bobby. It was nearly 10 o'clock, but he answered on the second ring. Mom, everything okay? Bobby, I need you to listen to me very carefully, I said. My voice was steady now, calm. The shaking had stopped. I heard something today. Something that changes everything. I told him about Jessica's phone call. I told him about the credit card balance. I told him about their plan for the house. Bobby was silent for a long moment after I finished. Mom, we need to act fast, he finally said. They could forge your signature on documents. They could do serious damage. Do you have somewhere safe to keep your important papers? I have a lockbox in my closet. All the documents are there. Good. Keep it locked and keep the key with you at all times. Tomorrow morning, first thing, I want you to call Dad's lawyer. Mr. Patterson, right? Tell him everything. Then I want you to go to the bank and freeze that credit card. Can you do that? Wes! The word came out strong and sure. Yes, I can do that. I'm proud of you, Mom. I know this hurts. I know he's your son. But what they're planning is elder abuse. It's illegal. You have every right to protect yourself. After we hung up, I didn't sleep. I lay in my bed and stared at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of my house. The heater clicking on. The branches of the oak tree scraping against the window. Daniel and Jessica's muffled voices through the wall, probably planning their future in my home. I thought about all the years I'd spent teaching children to be kind, to be honest, to treat others with respect. I thought about Richard and how hard we'd worked to build a life. I thought about every sacrifice I'd made as a mother, every time I'd put my children's needs before my own. And I realized that somewhere along the way, I'd confused love with enabling. I'd confused being a good mother with being a doormat. When the sun came up Monday morning, Margaret Thompson, the pushover, the pathetic old woman, was gone. In her place was someone they'd never met before. Someone who'd finally had enough. I got dressed in my best slacks and a nice blouse. I did my hair and put on lipstick. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back at me. But I liked what I saw. Strength, determination, a survivor. Daniel and Jessica were still asleep when I left the house at 8:30. I drove to Mr. Patterson's law office without an appointment. His secretary tried to tell me he was booked solid, but I planted myself in the waiting room chair and said, I'll wait. It's about elder financial abuse, and I need his help. I was in his office within 15 minutes. Mr. Patterson had been Richard's lawyer for 20 years. He was a thin man in his early 70s with kind eyes behind wire, rimmed glasses, and a reputation for being both thorough and discreet. When I walked into his office that morning, he took one look at my face and immediately asked his secretary to hold all his calls. "Maggie," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "What's happened?" I sat down and told him everything. The whole sordid story spilled out of me. The credit card charges, the overheard phone conversation, their plan to take my house and put me in a facility. I showed him the credit card statements I'd printed out that morning before leaving the house. Mr. Patterson's expression grew darker with each detail. When I finished, he sat back in his chair and steepled his fingers. "Maggie, what they're planning constitutes elder financial abuse. It's a serious crime in this state. The unauthorized use of your credit card alone is financial exploitation. If they've forged your signature on any documents or attempted to coerce you into signing over assets, that's criminal." "I don't want to send my son to jail," I said quickly, even though part of me wasn't sure that was true anymore. "I just want them out of my house and out of my life." "I understand. Let me ask you this. Have they had you sign anything recently? Any documents they said were for insurance purposes or estate planning or anything like that?" I thought back over the past few months. About 6 weeks ago, Daniel brought me some papers. He said they were for updating my homeowner's insurance. Something about making sure the beneficiaries were correct in case something happened to me. I signed them. Signed them. Patterson's jaw tightened. "Do you have copies?" "No. He said he'd file them with the insurance company and get me copies later. He never did. Maggie, I need you to authorize me to contact your insurance company and request copies of any documents filed in the last 6 months. I also need to run a title search on your property to make sure nothing's been filed with the county. They may have already attempted to add themselves to your deed." My stomach dropped. "They can do that. If they forged your signature on a quitclaim deed, yes. It's more common than you'd think in elder abuse cases. Family members take advantage of trust and access." He pulled out a legal pad and started making notes. "Here's what we're going to do. First, I'm going to have my paralegal run that title search immediately. Second, you're going to go directly to your bank and cancel that credit card. Not freeze it, cancel it entirely. Report the unauthorized charges as fraud, but Daniel will know. Maggie." Mr. Patterson leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. "They're already planning to move you into a facility and steal your home. They already know. The only question is whether you're going to let them do it." He was right. I knew he was right. I nodded slowly. "Third," he continued, "I'm going to draft a formal eviction notice. In this state, even without a lease, they're considered month-to-month tenants after living there this long. You'll need to give them 30 days notice to vacate. I'll have it ready by this afternoon, and you can serve it to them tonight. 30 days. The thought of them in my house for another month made me feel sick. I'm afraid that's the law. However, if they become threatening or you feel unsafe, you can call the police and request an emergency protective order. Given the financial exploitation, you'd have grounds." He made another note. "I'm also going to recommend you change your locks the moment they move out, and I want you to put fraud alerts on your credit reports today. If they have your social security number and other personal information, which they obviously do, they could open accounts in your name." The full scope of what they'd done, what they could still do, crashed over me like a wave. I felt myself starting to shake again. "Maggie, breathe," Mr. Patterson said. "You're doing the right thing. You're protecting yourself. That's not cruel, it's necessary." After leaving his office with instructions and a list of phone numbers to call, I drove to my bank. The branch manager, a woman named Carol who'd helped Richard and me set up our accounts years ago, listened to my story with increasing concern. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm so sorry this has happened to you," she said, typing rapidly on her computer. "I'm canceling this card immediately and flagging the account for fraud investigation. You'll need to fill out these dispute forms for the unauthorized charges. We'll work with you to recover as much as we can, but I need to be honest, since you voluntarily gave them access to the card initially, some of these charges may be difficult to dispute." "I understand. I just want it stopped." Carol nodded. "The card is canceled as of this moment. Any attempt to use it will be declined. I'm also putting a verbal password on all your accounts. From now on, anyone trying to access your accounts, even in person, will need to provide this password in addition to ID. Choose something only you would know." I chose Richard's mother's maiden name, something Daniel would never think of. "One more thing," Carol said, lowering her voice. "I've seen this before, Mrs. Thompson. More often than you'd think. Family members who take advantage. If they have access to your checks, your mail, any other financial documents, you need to secure all of that immediately. Consider getting a P.O. box for your mail. Check your credit report for any accounts you didn't open. And document everything, every conversation, every threat, everything. You may need it. By the time I left the bank, it was past noon. I sat in my car in the parking lot and called the 3 credit bureaus, placing fraud alerts on my reports. Then I requested copies of my credit reports to be mailed to me. If Daniel and Jessica had opened accounts in my name, I'd find out soon enough. My phone rang. It was Bobby. Mom, how'd it go with the lawyer? I told him about everything Mr. Patterson had said, about the eviction notice, about the possibility that they'd forged documents. Bobby listened, and I could hear the barely controlled fury in his breathing. I'm booking a flight, he said. I'll be there Thursday. Linda's staying with the girls, but I'm coming out to help you through this. You shouldn't have to do this alone. Bobby, you don't have to. Mum, stop. I'm coming. That's final. After we hung up, I sat in my car for a few more minutes, gathering my courage for what came next. I had to go home. I had to face them, knowing what I knew, pretending everything was normal until Mr. Patterson had the eviction notice ready. When I pulled into my driveway, Jessica's car was gone, but Daniel's truck was there. I found him in the kitchen, making a sandwich with my groceries, acting like he owned the place. Hey Mom, he said casually, not even looking at me. Where'd you go this morning? Just some errands, I said, keeping my voice light. Doctor's appointment, then the bank. Something flickered across his face. The bank? Everything okay? Fine. Just some routine account maintenance. I moved past him to put my purse in my room, my heart hammering. Did he suspect? Could he tell? That evening Mr. Patterson's secretary called. The title search was complete. Daniel and Jessica had attempted to file a quitclaim deed 3 weeks ago, adding both of their names to my house. But they'd made a mistake. They'd forged my signature, and the notary stamp was from a notary whose license had expired. The county clerk's office had rejected the filing pending verification. That's the good news, Mr. Patterson said when he called me back personally. The bad news is that they attempted it at all. This is fraud, Maggie. Clear, documented fraud. I prepared the eviction notice, and I'm also preparing a police report. You can file it whenever you're ready. I'll wait until I serve them the eviction notice, I said. I don't want them to have any warning. Understood. I'm emailing you the notice now. Print 2 copies, 1 for each of them. Serve it to them tonight if possible. And Maggie, be prepared for them to react badly. Have your phone ready to call 911 if things get heated. That evening, I printed the eviction notices in my bedroom with my door locked. My hands were steady as I folded them, and put them in envelopes with Daniel's and Jessica's names written in my careful teacher's handwriting. They were both home, watching television in my living room, when I walked out with the envelopes. I'd changed into comfortable clothes and pulled my hair back. I wanted to look strong, not weak, not like a victim. Daniel, Jessica, I said, my voice calm and clear. I need to give you both something. That's when everything exploded. Daniel took the envelope from my hand with a confused smile, the kind you give someone when you think they're handing you an invitation to dinner or a birthday card. Jessica accepted hers with barely a glance, her attention still half on the television. I stood there and watched as Daniel opened his first. I watched his eyes scan the legal letterhead. I watched his expression shift from confusion to disbelief to something dark and ugly that I'd never seen on my son's face before. What the hell is this? He said, his voice low and dangerous. Jessica had opened hers now too, and her face had gone pale. You're evicting us. Are you serious right now? Yes, I said simply. You have 30 days to find another place to live. I want you out of my house. Daniel stood up so fast the envelope fell from his hands. Your house? We've been living here for 2 years, Mom. This is our home too. No, I said, and my voice didn't shake. This is my home, Richard's and mine. You were guests, and you've overstayed your welcome. Overstayed our welcome. Jessica's voice went shrill. After everything we've done for you. Keeping you company, taking care of this place. Taking care of it. I almost laughed. Jessica, you've rearranged my furniture, taken over my kitchen, run up $23,000 on my credit card and… Oh yes! I heard your phone conversation yesterday. The one where you laughed about what a pushover I am and discussed your plans to steal my house and put me in a facility. The color drained from Jessica's face. Daniel's mouth opened and closed like a fish. You were listening to a private conversation. Jessica sputtered, but there was panic in her eyes now. You were having it on my back porch with the door open, I said calmly. In my house. There's no expectation of privacy when you're plotting to commit elder abuse in the victim's own home. Elder abuse. Daniel found his voice, and it was full of indignation. That's insane. We've been helping you. We've been taking care of you? But charging $23,000 on a card I gave you for emergencies, by attempting to forge my signature on a quitclaim deed to steal my house. Yes, Daniel, I know about that too. The county clerk's office rejected it, but you tried. You and Jessica tried to steal my home. Daniel's face went from pale to red. That wasn't stealing. That was financial planning, the lawyer said. The lawyer who's helping you commit fraud. I shook my head. Daniel, I've spoken with my own attorney. What you've done is a crime. Multiple crimes, actually. Financial exploitation of an elderly person. Attempted fraud. Forgery. I'm your son! Daniel shouted, and there it was, the entitlement, the anger at being caught. You're supposed to take care of me, Dad would have wanted. Don't you dare, I said. And my voice cut through his like a knife. Don't you dare tell me what your father would have wanted. Richard worked his whole life to provide for us, to give you and Bobby opportunities. He would be disgusted by what you've become, by what you've tried to do to me. Jessica stood up now, and her face was twisted with fury. You ungrateful old woman. We gave up everything to be here with you. We could have had our own place, our own life, but we stayed to keep you from being alone. You stayed because it was free. My voice rose for the first time. You stayed because you were using me. I heard you, Jessica. I heard every word. You think I'm pathetic. You think I'm a pushover. You were planning to have me moved into a facility by Christmas like I was a piece of furniture you didn't need anymore. Maybe you should be in a facility, Jessica screamed. You're old. You can barely take care of yourself. This house is too much for you. I'm 68 years old, and there's nothing wrong with me except a son who turned out to be a thief and his wife who's a con artist. I was shaking now, but not with fear. With rage. With the pure, cleansing fire of 2 years of suppressed anger finally finding its voice. I walk 3 miles a day. I volunteer at the library. I manage my own finances just fine when people aren't stealing from me. This house is not too much for me, but you are. Daniel moved toward me, and something in his posture made me step back. You're not doing this, he said, his voice gone quiet and cold. You're not kicking us out. We live here. My wife calls the shots here. You're the one who's leaving. There it was. The line I'd never forget. The moment my son stopped being my son and became someone I didn't recognize. My wife calls the shots here. You're leaving. He shouted now, his face inches from mine. You've got 30 days to pack your things and move into one of those facilities we found. We already paid a deposit at one. You're going, not us? I pulled my phone out of my pocket. Step back, Daniel. Right now. Or what? You'll call the police on your own son. He laughed, but it was an ugly sound. Go ahead. Tell them how ungrateful you are. Tell them how you're throwing your own child out on the street. I'm calling them to report that you're threatening me. I said, my finger hovering over 911. And to file a report about the $23,000 you stole and the attempted fraud on my house deed. That's what I'm going to tell them. Jessica grabbed Daniel's arm. Daniel, stop. She's serious. I don't care if she's serious. But he stepped back, and I could see the calculation in his eyes now. He was realizing I wasn't bluffing, that the pathetic pushover was gone. You have 30 days, I repeated. The eviction notice is legal and binding. If you're not out by November 19th, the sheriff will remove you. And first thing tomorrow morning, I'm filing a police report about the credit card fraud and the attempted deed forgery. My lawyer has all the documentation. You can't do this? Jessica said, but her voice had lost its certainty. You gave us that credit card. You let us use it. For emergencies. Not for casino trips and jewelry and cash advances. And I certainly didn't authorize $23,000 in charges. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and felt something inside me break for the last time. I loved you, Daniel. I would have done anything for you. But you and Jessica didn't want a mother and a family. You wanted a mark. Someone to use up and throw away. Well, congratulations, you succeeded. The loving, trusting mother you remember. She's gone. You killed her. Daniel's face crumpled, and for a second, just a second, I saw the little boy I'd raised. The one who'd cried when his goldfish died. The one who'd held my hand on the first day of kindergarten. But then Jessica was there, whispering something in his ear, and his expression hardened again. You'll regret this, he said. When you're alone in some home with no one to visit you, you'll regret this. No, I said quietly. Because I'll have my dignity, I'll have my home, and I'll have Bobby, who actually knows what it means to be a son. I turned and walked to my bedroom, my phone still in my hand, my heart racing. I locked the door behind me and stood there, listening to them argue in harsh whispers in the living room. Then I heard Jessica's car keys jingle, heard the front door slam, heard them peel out of my driveway like teenagers. I sat on my bed and called Bobby. I did it, I said when he answered. I served them the eviction notice. How'd they take it? About as well as you'd expect. Daniel said his wife calls the shots and that I was the one leaving. He got aggressive. I almost called 911. Bobby swore under his breath. Mom, I want you to call the police anyway. File a report about him threatening you. You need a paper trail. And I'm changing my flight. I'll be there tomorrow night instead of Thursday. Bobby, you don't have to? Yes, I do. What if they come back tonight and things get worse? What if they try to intimidate you into backing down? You need someone there? He paused. I'm proud of you, Mom. I know that was hard. But you did the right thing. After we hung up, I did call the non-emergency police line. I filed a report about Daniel's threatening behavior and requested extra patrols past my house for the next few weeks. The officer I spoke with was kind and professional, and he took down all the details about the credit card fraud and the attempted deed forgery as well. "Mom, what you're describing is a clear case of elder financial abuse," he said. "We take these cases very seriously. I'm flagging your address in our system. If you feel threatened at any time, you call 911 immediately. We'll have someone there in minutes." That night, I barely slept. I kept my phone on my nightstand fully charged with 911 ready to dial. I listened to every sound in the house, the creaks and settles that had been familiar and comforting but now felt ominous. Around 2 in the morning, I heard a car in the driveway. Daniel and Jessica were home. I heard them come inside, heard their bedroom door close. Then silence. The next morning, I woke before dawn and got dressed quickly. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, and watched the sunrise through the window. When Daniel emerged around 10, still in his pajamas, we didn't speak. He poured coffee, glared at me, and went back to his room. It was going to be a very long 30 days. Bobby arrived Tuesday evening, pulling his rental car into my driveway just after 7 o'clock. I'd been watching for him from the window like a child waiting for Christmas, and when I saw him get out of the car, tall and solid and steady like his father, I started crying before I even reached the door. He wrapped me in a bear hug right there on the porch, and I held onto my eldest son like he was a life raft in a storm. "It's okay, Mom," he said into my hair. "I'm here now. We're going to fix this." Daniel and Jessica were in their room with the door closed. They'd been avoiding me for the past 2 days, which was fine by me. The tension in the house was thick enough to choke on. When Bobby walked in carrying his overnight bag, their door opened, and Daniel appeared. The two brothers hadn't seen each other in over a year. There was no warm greeting. "Bobby," Daniel said flatly. "Daniel." Bobby's voice was cold. "We need to talk, all of us. Living room. Now." I don't care what you think. Living room. Now." There was steel in Bobby's voice, the kind that didn't leave room for argument. Daniel's jaw tightened, but he called for Jessica, and they both emerged. We sat in the living room like opposing armies. Bobby and me on one side, Daniel and Jessica on the other. Bobby didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I've seen the credit card statements," he said, pulling out printed copies from his bag. $23,847. "I've also seen the documentation about the attempted quitclaim deed fraud. So let's be very clear about what's happening here. You two have been systematically stealing from our mother for 2 years. That's not an opinion. That's a fact backed up by documentation and evidence." "Bobby, you don't understand the situation," Daniel started. "I understand perfectly. You're thieves. You've been using Mom like an ATM, living rent-free in her house, and planning to steal her home and warehouse her in a facility." "Jessica," I heard the recording. Jessica's eyes went wide. "Recording?" I hadn't told them that Bobby had me record Jessica's phone conversation when she'd repeated the same boasting to her mother yesterday, thinking I'd gone to the grocery store. But I'd been in my car in the garage, and I'd captured every word on my phone. "That's illegal," Jessica shrieked. "You can't record someone without their permission." "Actually, this is a one-party consent state," Bobby said calmly. "Mom was part of the environment where the conversation took place, her own property, which makes it legal. But that's beside the point. The point is that you two are out of here in 28 days, and if you try anything at all, to intimidate Mom, to steal from her, or to cause problems, I will personally ensure that the police throw the book at you." "You can't talk to us like this," Daniel said, standing up. "This is between me and Mom. You don't get a say." Bobby stood too, and he was 3 inches taller than Daniel and 100 times angrier. "I absolutely get a say when someone is abusing my mother. You think because I live in Tennessee I don't care. You think because I haven't been here I don't see what you've done. I've been getting calls from Mom for months, hearing how tired she sounds, how stressed she is. I knew something was wrong. I just didn't want to believe my own brother would do this. We were helping her." Daniel's voice rose. "She was alone. She was lonely. We gave up our own lives to be here." "You gave up nothing?" Bobby shot back. "You were evicted from your apartment. You had nowhere else to go. Mom took you in out of kindness, and you repaid that kindness by bleeding her dry. You know what I found when I looked into your finances, little brother? You haven't had a real job in 18 months. Neither has Jessica. You've been living entirely off Mom's money. That's not helping, that's parasitism." Jessica stood now, her face flushed with anger. "How dare you investigate us? That's an invasion of privacy. You tried to steal a house. I think your privacy concerns are pretty low on my priority list." Bobby turned to me. "Mom, I've been in touch with Mr. Patterson. He's filed the police report about the credit card fraud. There's going to be an investigation." I've also contacted the Adult Protective Services Division. They're opening a case for elder financial abuse. You called APS on us. Daniel looked genuinely shocked. Bobby, they could press charges. I could go to jail. Less, Bobby said simply. You could, and you should. What you've done is criminal. The only reason I'm not pushing harder for immediate prosecution is because Mom asked me not to. She still loves you, even though you clearly don't love her. I love my mother, Daniel's voice cracked. How can you say that? Because people who love their mothers don't steal from them, Bobby said quietly. They don't plot to take their homes. They don't call them pathetic pushovers. They don't threaten them in their own houses. That's not love, Daniel. I don't know what it is, but it's not love. The room fell silent. Jessica was crying now, but they were angry tears. Daniel's hands were clenched into fists at his sides. And I sat there watching my two sons face off, feeling the final threads of my family unraveling. I want you both to know something, I said quietly, and everyone turned to look at me. 28 days from now, when you leave this house, you won't have a key. You won't be welcome here. If you try to contact me, I'll get a restraining order. I'm changing my phone number, my email, everything. As far as I'm concerned, I no longer have a younger son. Mom. Daniel's voice was strangled. No. You don't get to mom me anymore. You lost that right when you decided I was nothing more than a source of money. When you decided my home should be your home and I should be shipped off somewhere to rot. I gave you life, Daniel. I raised you, I loved you. And this is how you repay me? We can fix this. Daniel said, and now he was crying too. Mom, please. We made mistakes, we got greedy. But we can pay you back. We can make this right. With what money? Bobby asked coldly. You don't have jobs, you don't have savings, you don't have anything except what you've stolen from Mom. So tell me, how exactly are you going to pay back $23,000? Daniel had no answer. Jessica was staring at the floor, mascara running down her face. Here's what's going to happen, Bobby continued. You have 28 days to find a place and move out. During that time, you will not speak to Mom unless absolutely necessary. You will not use any of her belongings. You will buy your own food with your own money. You will not touch anything in this house that isn't yours. And if you violate any of these terms, I will call the police and have you removed immediately. Do you understand? You can't set rules for us, Jessica spat. You don't even live here. I do now, Bobby said. I've taken a leave of absence from work. I'm staying here until you two are gone. So get used to seeing me, because I'm not going anywhere. The look on Daniel's face was a mixture of betrayal and fury. He turned to me. So this is it? You're choosing Bobby over me? No, I said softly. You chose yourself over me. I'm just finally accepting that choice. Daniel and Jessica stormed back to their room, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the pictures on the walls. Bobby sat down next to me and took my hand. I'm sorry you're going through this, Mom. I'm sorry too. Sorry I let it get this bad. Sorry I didn't see what they were doing sooner. It's not your fault. They're predators. They knew exactly what they were doing. He squeezed my hand. But it's over now. In 4 weeks they'll be gone, and you can start rebuilding your life. Over the next few days, Bobby made good on his promise. He set up his laptop at the kitchen table and worked remotely. But he was always there, a solid presence that made me feel safe for the first time in months. Daniel and Jessica barely came out of their room except to slink into the kitchen late at night when they thought we were asleep. Mr. Patterson called with an update. The police investigation was moving forward. Several of the credit card charges had been flagged as clearly fraudulent. Cash advances Daniel and Jessica had taken out and the casino trip where they'd charged over $4,000 in a single weekend. The credit card company had agreed to reverse about $8,000 in charges that were obviously not authorized by me. That still leaves you on the hook for about $15,000, Mr. Patterson said. I'm sorry, Maggie. Because you initially gave them access to the card, it's harder to prove all the charges were unauthorized. But we're working on it. 15,000 is better than 23, I said. I can handle 15,000. Bobby also helped me open a new bank account at a different bank, one Daniel and Jessica knew nothing about. We transferred all my money, closed my old accounts, and I started having my pension and Social Security deposited into the new account. We changed all my passwords, set up two-factor authentication on everything, and put fraud alerts on all my credit. They can't touch you now, Bobby said. Financially, you're locked down tight. On day 10 of the 30-day countdown, I came home from the grocery store to find Jessica in the living room, packing up some of the decorative items she'd bought. Where's Bobby? She asked nervously. At the hardware store. Getting new locks installed next month. I set my groceries on the counter. Why? She turned to face me, and she looked smaller somehow. Diminished. I wanted to apologize for everything. I got carried away. We both did. We just wanted a better life, and it seemed like you had so much. Stop. I held up my hand. I don't want to hear it, Jessica. You're not sorry. You're sorry you got caught. There's a difference. That's not fair. What's not fair is what you did to me. What's not fair is that I opened my home to you, and you saw that as an opportunity to take everything I had. You didn't want a better life. You wanted my life. She wiped at her eyes. Daniel really does love you, you know. He talks about you all the time. About growing up. About his dad. He's weak. He got in over his head, and I pushed him. This is more my fault than his. No, I said. Daniel is a grown man. He made his choices. And so did you, and now you both get to live with the consequences. She left the room without another word. That night, I heard them arguing through the walls. Jessica's voice rising and falling, Daniel's lower and angrier. The next morning she was gone. Her car wasn't in the driveway. Her clothes were missing from the closet. She'd left Daniel behind. Daniel emerged from his room around noon, looking like he hadn't slept. His eyes were red-rimmed, his hair uncombed. He found Bobby and me in the kitchen where we were having lunch. She's gone, he said, his voice hollow. Jessica left. She took her stuff and left. Bobby didn't look up from his sandwich. Smart woman. She saw the writing on the wall. Bobby, please. Daniel's voice cracked. She left me. She's gone. For a moment, I felt that old maternal instinct kick in, the urge to comfort my child, to make his pain go away. But then I remembered everything. The lies, the theft, the plans to steal my home, and the instinct died. What did you expect? I asked quietly. She was using you the same way you were using me. Now that the well's run dry, she moved on. That's what people like that do. Daniel slumped into a chair, his head in his hands. I've ruined everything, haven't I? Yes, Bobby said simply. You have. Is there any way to fix this? Mom. Daniel looked at me with desperate eyes. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But I'm your son. That has to count for something. I looked at this man who'd once been my baby boy. The child I'd rocked to sleep, whose nightmares I'd chased away, whose skin knees I'd bandaged. And I felt nothing but a deep, abiding sadness. You're right, I said. You are my son. That's why this hurts so much. If you were a stranger, I could chalk it up to being conned and move on. But you're not a stranger. You're someone I loved with every fiber of my being. Someone I would have died for. And you looked at that love and saw weakness. You saw an opportunity. I didn't mean. Yes, you did. You and Jessica planned it. You talked about it. You laughed about it. You called me pathetic. My voice stayed steady, calm. The Daniel I raised died somewhere along the way, and I didn't even notice. Maybe he died when you met Jessica. Maybe he died before that, but he's gone. And the person sitting at my table right now is a stranger who looks like my son. Mum, please. You have 18 days left in this house. I continued. I suggest you use them to find a job and a place to live. Bobby's already researched apartments in your price range. There are several that will work with people who have bad credit. We'll even give you first month's rent and deposit as a final gift. But after that, you're on your own. Daniel's face went through a series of emotions: shock, anger, resignation. You'd really do that? Just cut me off completely? You already cut yourself off? Bobby said. We're just acknowledging reality. Over the next 2.5 weeks, Daniel became a ghost in the house. He'd leave early in the morning, actually job hunting, I think, and come back late. He ate microwave meals in his room. He spoke to us only when necessary. Bobby kept a close eye on him, making sure he didn't try to take anything that wasn't his. Mr. Patterson called with good news. The police had arrested Jessica in another county, trying to open a credit card in someone else's name. Apparently, I wasn't her first victim. She was facing multiple charges of identity theft and fraud. When the officer contacted me about pressing charges for what she'd done to me, I said yes without hesitation. What about Daniel? The officer asked. He was complicit in the credit card fraud and the attempted deed forgery. I looked at Bobby, who nodded. Press charges, I said. He's an adult. He made his choices. That night, 2 detectives came to the house and arrested Daniel. I watched from the window as they put him in handcuffs and led him to their car. He looked back at me once, his face a mask of betrayal and disbelief, like he couldn't believe his own mother would do this to him. But I'd done nothing to him. He'd done it all to himself. Bobby put his arm around my shoulders as the police car pulled away. You okay? I will be, I said. And I meant it. Daniel made bail the next day. I had no idea who paid for it, and I didn't ask. He came back to the house one final time with 2 police officers to collect his belongings. He didn't say a word to me, just packed his things, loaded them into his truck, and drove away. I never saw him again. The day after Daniel left, Bobby and I had the locks changed. Then we went through the entire house together, room by room, reclaiming each space. We repainted the bedroom Daniel and Jessica had used. We moved my family photos back into the living room. We threw away everything they'd left behind. How does it feel? Bobby asked as we stood in the now empty guest room. Like I can breathe again, I said. Bobby stayed for another week, making sure I was settled and safe. We spent long evenings talking about everything and nothing. He told me stories about his daughters, about Linda, about his work at the garage. And I told him about my fears, my loneliness, and how I'd let those feelings make me vulnerable. "You're human, Mom," he said. "You wanted to help your son. That's not a weakness. What they did, that's on them, not you." Before Bobby left to go back to Tennessee, we sat down together and created a plan for my future. I'd volunteer more at the library and at the senior center. I'd join a book club. I'd reconnect with old friends I'd let slip away during my marriage and then isolated further when Richard died. I'd live my life my way without apology. "And Mom," Bobby said as he loaded his suitcase into his rental car, "you call me if you need anything. Anything at all, and I'm coming to visit every other month from now on. No arguments. No arguments." I agreed, hugging him tight. After he left, I stood in my driveway and looked at my house. Truly mine now, in every sense of the word. It was quiet, it was peaceful. And for the first time in 2 years, it felt like home. Sex Monties Ladar. I'm sitting in my favorite chair by the window, the late afternoon sun warming my face, and I'm thinking about how much can change in half a year. Daniel took a plea deal. 5 years probation. Restitution of $8,000, the amount the credit card company couldn't recover, and mandatory counseling. Jessica got 2 years in prison for the multiple fraud charges across 3 counties. I haven't spoken to Daniel since the day he was arrested. He's tried to call a few times. The calls show up as restricted number, but I know it's him. I never answer. Bobby says Daniel asks about me sometimes, asks if there's any chance I'd talk to him. The answer is no. Some people might think that's harsh. Some might say I should forgive him, that he's my son, that family is family. But those people haven't walked in my shoes. They haven't felt the betrayal of being used by someone they'd die for. They haven't heard their own child call them pathetic and plan their removal like they're unwanted furniture. I've joined a support group for victims of elder financial abuse. There are 12 of us, all with similar stories, children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews who saw our resources as their opportunity. We meet twice a month at the senior center, and we share our experiences. We remind each other that we're not alone, that what happened to us wasn't our fault, and that protecting ourselves isn't selfish, it's survival. I've also started volunteering with Adult Protective Services, training social workers on the warning signs of elder abuse. I tell my story, not for sympathy but to educate. If one person hears it and recognizes what's happening to them or someone they love, then maybe some good can come from all this pain. Bobby and his family came to visit last month. We had Thanksgiving dinner together, just the 5 of us in my dining room. Linda made sweet potato casserole. The girls told me about school and boys and their plans for college. And Bobby carved the turkey just like Richard used to do. It wasn't the big family gathering I'd once imagined, but it was real, it was honest. It was filled with people who loved me without conditions or ulterior motives. That's more than enough. I've learned something important through all of this. You can love someone and still protect yourself from them. You can be a good mother and still say no. You can be kind without being a victim. And you can be alone without being lonely. My house is quiet now, but it's my quiet. My peace. My sanctuary. I think about Richard sometimes and wonder what he'd say about everything that happened. I like to think he'd be proud of me for standing up for myself, for refusing to be a victim, for choosing dignity over false peace. The credit card debt is nearly paid off. Mr. Patterson helped me negotiate with the credit card company, and between the restitution payments from Daniel and my own resources, I'll be clear in another 6 months. My credit report is clean. No accounts opened fraudulently, no other surprises. My finances are stable, and I've set up a trust to protect my assets and ensure no one can take advantage of me again. I sleep well at night now. I don't listen for footsteps in the hallway or worry about what might be taken from me while I'm not looking. I don't walk on eggshells in my own home or feel guilty for wanting boundaries. I'm 69 years old, and I'm finally free. Sometimes people ask me if I regret how everything turned out, if I wish I'd handled things differently, if I miss Daniel. The answer is complicated. Do I regret that my son became someone capable of elder abuse? Of course. Do I wish I'd seen the warning signs earlier and protected myself sooner? Absolutely. Do I miss the Daniel I thought I had, the son I believed in? Every single day. But do I regret standing up for myself? Do I regret choosing my own well-being over being used? Do I regret setting boundaries and enforcing consequences? Not for one single second. I'm Margaret Thompson. I'm a retired teacher, a widow, a mother to 1 son who loves me and 1 son I lost to greed. I'm a survivor of elder financial abuse. I'm a volunteer, a support group member, an advocate. And I'm still here, living in my home on my terms with my dignity intact. When my son yelled, "My wife calls the shots here, you're leaving," I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because in that moment I realized I'd been asleep and was finally waking up. And then I canceled his card. Best decision I ever made.